Ask you this question. What you see is what you get? I mean, does the media actually bother to take the time to really investigate? We're talking here today about Israel's judicial reform and whether or not the picture is really clear as to what's going on. So I'm David Solomon. I'm flying here solo today. Normally I'm with my friend Stuart Brisgell. We host this podcast called The Rent Network, where we bring you unfiltered, uncensored, unedited conversations all about a wide range of topics. So this podcast is dedicated to giving you the platform to express your opinions, your thoughts, experiences, ideas, and hear from a variety of perspectives and honest and straight opinions. Join us as we dive in today into the news, pop culture, politics, and so much more. From we rant about the absurdity of modern life to discussions about the deeper issues affecting society. And this is one of them. Ladies and gentlemen, the Rent Network has you covered. Sit back, relax, and enjoy on this discovery of an exploration. It's time to jump into the Rent Network. Okay, so, the media loves when it focuses on the story. And there's certain countries that just seem to get in the West all the love and attention. And when I mean love, I don't mean it in a positive way. And one of those countries is Israel. Now, Israel has, since 1967, been the ire of the West and the Western media because, unfortunately, it doesn't jive. Israel has been that little country that decided they're not going to wait for the big boys to help them out. They did things on their own. And as time progressed and the media, coupled with the Arab propaganda, the view on Israel was becoming more and more negative. Now, Israel has been a left-leaning country up until the late 1970s, and it was established on that foundation: collectivity, socialism, a lot of that stuff. And as a result, the foundation of the country, albeit positive and optimistic and somewhat, unrealistic, that was its foundation, and it grew on that. But it was flawed, and we understand how flawed it was, and yet every time there has been a change, Israelis react badly, but so does the West, because, let's talk about what's bad about Israel. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, the longest standing, I should say, Prime Minister of Israel, he's about to make another big change in Israel. Now, I'm saying another one because he's done this before, not judicial reform, but reform. As I mentioned earlier, Israel was based on a socialist value. That's how it started. And all the power economically was wielded by unions. Very, very powerful. And the belief was that without the unions, Israel couldn't survive as a country. Economically, employment, you name it. The Israeli currency was weak, devalued many times, problematic. It was a third world mindset. It wasn't a free market concept because that, by the way, was part of the socialism. Free market and socialism don't jive. So Benjamin Netanyahu, in one of his first mandates, wanted to reform the economy by going from socialism, where the unions had all the power, to a free market economy. Well, wouldn't you know, not only were the unions upset, employees believed that they were in trouble. They were going to lose jobs. They were going to lose, wealth. They were going to lose, because that's what the unions told them. And the strikes and the hundreds of thousands of people were all over the streets, flooding the streets. Fast forward, what was the reform lead to? The startup nation. Israel became the startup nation. All of a sudden, all these startups just popped up all over the place. Investment was coming in from all over the world. There isn't a single American technology company that doesn't have a base now in Israel because of what has happened. The free market has put more prosperity into Israeli homes, created more employment, more opportunity, great results. The currency strengthened. Israel became suddenly no longer a third world country, but a country that people were listening to. Well, with reform, you need intestinal fortitude. And in Israel, especially when everyone has an opinion, this time around, the reform has gotten really bad. in terms of the reaction. So what am I talking about here? So in the United States, in Canada, in the West, many countries have a constitution. Many of these countries have checks and balances, multiple levels of government, and a judicial body appointed by the legislature. Now, listen to what I just said. At least two bodies that deal with legislation and an appointed judicial system. But not in Israel. When Israel was established, it had a Knesset, which comprises of 120 members, and a judicial body that's self-appointed. It wields excessive power. In fact, the judicial can just strike down any legislation. The judicial power can do any investigation it desires. The justices wield more power than the legislative body. Does that sound familiar to a Canadian or to an American system or to a British system? Of course not. The justices have to make sure that they can't just call their own investigations. And on top of it all, they can strike down law based on law, but not just unilaterally. And in Israel, that's what was going on. So Benjamin Netanyahu, who has been one of those reformists, decided, you know what, it's time to tweak the judicial system so that now, instead of being self-appointed judges, they're appointed by the legislature, and they're held accountable for what they do, and they can't just do all these wild goose chases and unnecessary judicial investigations. Now, the suspicious media, of course, realizes that, you know what, Benjamin Netanyahu is corrupt. So, of course, he's going to want to do judicial reform because he's just going to strip away any opportunity for him to be investigated. When Donald Trump came to power, Benjamin Netanyahu was called the Trump of the Middle East. So whatever Netanyahu has done has been tied into Donald Trump, and therefore bad. Can't be good. The left liberal media in Israel crucifies Netanyahu from here to there. He's been investigated time and time again without cause and has not been found guilty once. But his wife, who yelled at her gardener, that's okay, or whatever. This is how Israel works. And therefore, when the Jerusalem Post reports it, Haaretz, a left-leaning, very left-leaning publication, reports it, or any publication, this becomes fodder for the West. The media loves it. Proof. Wolf Blitzer and George Antonopoulos from ABC, and I probably got his name wrong. It's Stephanopoulos. Thank you. George Stephanopoulos. Both interviewed Benjamin Netanyahu to discuss this judicial reform. They got their facts wrong. It was all supposition. It was all predicated on US and Canadian systems, not the Israeli system. And as a result, accused him of trying to grab power and being an autocrat. Very Trump-like way. And each time that Netanyahu tried to explain himself, he was interrupted. And Wolf Blitzer recently just cut him off time and time again. And Netanyahu had to tell him, like he's had to tell other reporters, stop talking, let me answer, and you're wrong. The judicial reform in question over here is to take back the absolute power and abuse that the judicial body has. The Attorney General prevented the Justice Minister from appointing his chosen candidate to a senior legal position, despite the minister's clear legal prerogative. But the justice system can do whatever they want. And because there isn't a second body, like a Senate, or for that matter, a constitution, this is a problem. The reform has to be different. It can't be treated like Canada, the United States. See, Israel can't just, you're probably sitting there going, so go pass the constitution. Well, herein lies the problem, ladies and gentlemen. The 120-member Knesset has never had a majority in its 75-year history. Or since the rebirth of the state of Israel, there hasn't been one majority government. Not one. It's all a coalition of minorities, minority governments. It's a coalition of parties that have something in common. But as we know, in minority governments, even the little guy wields a lot of power. Israel could never pass a constitution without a majority government. And as a result, it's caught in this loophole. So therefore, to ensure that serving judges are held accountable, that the selection is properly done through an independent, method, for God's sakes, the judges need to have some sort of reform. Now, unfortunately, what ends up happening is, and why there are these protests, is that people believe what the media is throwing at them, that this is a power grab, that Netanyahu is a corrupt prime minister, and therefore this is all bad. The truth of the matter is that this is not it at all. And if you look at his track record, it wasn't about grabbing power. It was about fixing a major problem that holds back Israel. Now, investors have pulled money back. The currency's taken a hit because governments, as usual, don't dig in, don't go with what, which is controversial. They need to go with what's the flow. And what the flow is right now is, let's shit on Israel because of this judicial reform. It's not fact. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not fact. Just because CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, NBC, CBC, CTV, all of them like to report anti-Israel stance on a regular basis. Just look at how they deal with the Palestinians. Then you think you're going to give Netanyahu a break? Of course not. They're going to report everything that could go wrong. Supposedly, theoretically, not practical. Benjamin Netanyahu has been on witch hunt after witch hunt on witch hunt. It hasn't stopped. They accused him of taking bribes. Wasn't true. They've accused him of other things. Hasn't been proven fact yet. And yet, here again, is the liberal media attacking a conservative prime minister who are ignoring his track record of improving and in putting Israel on the map. But instead, it would rather have a judicial body like the West. I mean, think about it. When we just heard the legislation in Supreme Court of the United States, 3 consecutive 6-3 votes against what liberals wanted, what did they say? Stack the system. Get rid of the conservative judges. They're anti-democratic. And they're applying the same philosophy in Israel. Don't take the power away from the judicial body because they could screw Netanyahu, and that's what we want. Because they're not going to screw the left. They're going to screw the right. And that's exactly what has ended up happening here. The judicial system in Israel, albeit has, if you look on the justices, if you have an Arab justice minister, you have an Arab justice, on the Supreme Court, Israeli justices on the Supreme Court, if you dug deep, you would say, my God, look how impressive this is. But when you look at what they have done, could you imagine that Justin Trudeau or Joe Biden pass a legislation and without cause, without anything, strike it down? No, they need the law. There needs to be a writ. And it doesn't happen in Israel. It's just because. So if you're going to ask me today, is Benjamin Netanyahu on the right track? He's on the right track. That he allied himself with a bunch of, religious right-wing parties that could cause problems, I agree with that. But judicial reform needs to happen. And it's going to hurt. It's going to be difficult. But it's the right thing to do at this point. And stop using Western, anything from the West to try to apply it there to say, oh, it's not acceptable. It is. Do your homework before you criticize Israel, though. On that's it for today's episode. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate you listening to the Rant Network. Hope you enjoyed this conversation and gained some valuable insights on what's going on in Israel. Just don't believe the media. We appreciate your support and hope you'll join us again every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, noon Eastern. We are live. We are uncensored, unfiltered. You know the routine. Follow us on social media. Check us out. Please on our website. Check out back, those episodes that you've missed. We thank you again. Really do appreciate it. And look forward to seeing you next time. Cheers.